Good afternoon. My name is Emily Hunt. I'm here with my team, Kranthi and Shashi. We build business applications with Dynamics 365 and Power Platform and embedded AI. Today, we're going to present a solution that we built to digitally transform our complex revenue processing. We're using out-of-the-box Dynamics 365 capabilities, and when needed, we've done some co-development with some other product teams, like the Visio team and Dynamics 365, and also with the Power Platform team for the robotic process automation, which we will demo in a moment. Some of the solutions that you've seen are also published on AppSource. One of them is the Dynamics 365 for BPO. We also have our attachment management and other capabilities that my team is going to demo to you. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Emily. See, we lost quite a few people after the lunch, and we'll try and work hard to keep you guys awake, those who made it here. So where I'm going to start with is in our automation journey, what we kind of tackled was digitization of revenue processing. I'm sure everyone in this room will agree with me that revenue processing is complex, it's critical to every enterprise. But lots of applications, lots of services, and processes need to come together and make sure revenue is recognized, right? At Microsoft, what makes it even more complex is we sell our products and services through multiple channels, and especially through our partner ecosystem. And when we embarked on this journey for digital transformation about 2 years ago, our charter was clear. It was we were doing all the goodness, as in make sure efficiency was gained. We were improving accuracies, reducing the cost, but the mandate was clearer. We were told we could not impact the stability of our systems. We had to make sure that there was no revenue left on the table at the end of every quarter processing. So now, given all that, let's try and understand the scope of our task. So we process about $100 billion in revenue every year from 14 different business units. That means we have every business unit has its own requirements, has its own programs, has its own processes. So we are looking at multiple workflows and process flows across business units. And the second complexity is, again, a concurrency, and we have about 4,000 agents that are in the tool that are geo-dispersed and in 3 major regional operating centers. And then to layer on top of that is, because we are a global company, we have compliance and licensing and regulation controls that we have to comply with for each country. So, and before I forget, I have to add one more thing. And there are also multiple languages. Being global also means we have multiple languages that we have to recognize and process and take in and accept as part of intake. So now I want to get to the next slide, which talks about how do we tackle this and how do we solve this puzzle. So in terms of process, if you look at the different verticals that you have, the first one is inbound, where the intake comes in. There are multiple channels. We rationalize the channels for intake. And then I'm going to talk about AI services in a bit. But then the 2 other ones are triage and validation, where an agent or a gatekeeper looks at the case that's sent for revenue processing, whether it's eligible, whether it's valid. Those checks happen in triage and validation. And then it comes to data entry, where then the data is entered into whatever your target systems are. And at the end of this, the case is closed out, and with submission and outbound. So what we did was we started our journey with, we built the platform on Dynamics 365. That is what helped us automate our different workflows. And then we layered Azure on top of that. We used blob storage to store all our attachments. We have about 3 terabytes of attachments. So for us, it made sense to move it out of Dynamics 365 and put it on blob storage. It gave us a little bit more efficiency and scalability, improved performance. And then we did data archival through Cosmos DB, and Shashi is going to talk about that in a little bit more in detail. And then we use data export services, and all of our reporting is off of our Azure, SQL Azure database. We call that Data Hub. Power BI on top of that, of course. So now that we have our platform ready, now we have our primary technology stack ready, now we started thinking in terms of how do we then bring in automation. So first thing we did was we automated case creation and routing. So what we did was we used ML and we used AI, and we looked at all our inbound emails, incoming cases, and we used ML to see what was the line of business they would belong to, what would the case taxonomy be, and then which queue should be routed to. So we did all that with ML. And then once we had the case creation and routing figured out, then we went into the second phase, which was automating our eligibility and data validation. So here what we did was we used OCR vision services to kind of look at the attachments that came in. We extracted the data using vision, and then we have our custom rules engine that we use to use that to run the eligibility and validation rules. So once we have the eligibility and data validation also automated, then we moved our attention to the third one. And you've heard a lot about this today since the keynote, which is we used our Power Automate to do data entry into our target systems. So as we went through this journey, there's a lot of customization we did on top of our existing platform capabilities. So where you see those little blue dots is where we took our customizations and we made it available in the AppSource. And we have many, all those are available in the AppSource. We have lots of downloads there, and it's tested and validated. And what you will see is this is where you will see the benefit of actually doing. We've done all the customization for you, so now it's time for you to configure, not customize. So I'll hand it off to Shashi to do the demo and take it forward with 3 critical services that we'll do a deeper dive on in terms of our digitization.
Thanks, Kranti. So I'd like to talk about how we have taken the Microsoft approach, which is working with our own R&D teams and also the rest of the ecosystem within Microsoft to ensure the planet scale revenue processing system is implemented for us. Primarily, we use Power Automate, primarily AKA the MS flows, as the backend or at the heart of the digital transformation here. Primarily to do 2 things. 1 for integrations, and 2, to provide the right workflow capabilities, which are always providing the next best action for the agent to do. Because with all the complexities that Kranti talked about, it's very hard to remember what is the right next step for a given line of business on a type of work. So that is what is provided by Power Automate. And then we have done 2 more important steps. One comes in the very starting of the process, which is digital data capture. One comes at the fag end of the process, which is automated data entry. We have used the AI builders capabilities to train our forms and extract the data digitally. So an example, as you have seen in the previous slide, from the intake channel, you get from a portal, a submission happens with an attachment. So we're extracting the data using AI builder capabilities and then use it and run the business rules on top of it and primarily put it onto the flows, UI flows, to actually enter into the right system. So that's the ultimate Power Automate solution that we have. Let me actually click down onto what exactly we have done on the digital data capture as the next step. So in this step, we have about 350 type of contracts, and each one has its own variations. We have taken those contracts, sampled it, and we trained an ML algorithm to actually provide the same output always. So in a contract, typically which is about 135 pages to 200 pages, we don't require all the data from it. So we needed to label what are the data points that are required and only extract the components that are required and then use it into your business process. This is a step which was always done by the agents, going through the contracts and printing so much of paper. So this step eliminated at least 20% of the work in the whole, typically 24 hours work that happens to actually get a contract set up. So this is the first step. So we have achieved around like 92%-ish, a little bit more than that on every occasion to get the data capture right. So what happens if it doesn't get right? So system flags particular field or a validation that is automatically done as fail. So you'll see that in part of the demo. So the agent has to take the manual clause on it. Then I'll touch upon the next, which is the automated data entry. We have our own custom tool, RPA tool built. We have replaced that with the UI flows that were announced. Again, we're part of the build, so we have early access to do it. In this scenario, so the data is extracted, validated through business rules. We took it and ran UI flows on top of it wherever appropriate. So wherever there is wherever there is an API available, so the data was obviously going through the flows to the target system. Wherever there is no API available, through UI flows, we have actually pushed the data into the target system. The guidance here was type and create a user flow for every scenario, and keep your reusable flows ready for your logging, parsing, any other common operations that you do. So an example on the right is one of the UI flows. You'll actually see that in the demo. With that said, let me quickly show you what I was talking about. So what you're seeing on the screen is a Dynamics 365 application, which is a customer service hub, which represent, in this case, it's a case representing a transaction. So the transaction of type enterprise agreement. So submitted by Contoso Adam Smith. Giving a little bit of more information here. So the case has a case revenue, and then it is submitted by web as a channel from a tool called CLT, and then it is currently in the process in America's Operative Center. So as I told, we have broken the process into multiple sub-process steps. These are the sub steps that agent will be popped, prior to me, there are a set of agents that have already worked on this case. On the very top, you'll see the process that Kranti was talking about. So the case is currently ready for data entry, and that means it has completed the previous steps before. Let me quickly show you what happened in the previous step. From the data capture, the data has come into the system, and we have nicely wrapped up a Power App on top of Dynamics 365, so we're not storing all the data within the Power Platform as needed. So it's in a system which is outside, but through the connectors that we have, we actually surface the data here, and on top of it, the custom business rules all happened. So I'll talk about the failed validations in a second, but just to provide you a visibility of what happened in the previous step for this particular record, there are so many validation rules that are completed by the system. Some of them are at a header level, some of them are at a detail level, etc. So the system passed most of the validations, which are otherwise done by an agent. And then on the failed rules, there are too many reasons why a failure happens. Either there is no confidence on that particular very rule. That's why, in this case, with the date format, system could have already passed it, but since it's being a critical rule, so system left it open. So agent goes and puts the right format. So in general, once everything is done, agent moves this step to the next step. Automatically, the next workbench, which is the data entry, is triggered. So over here, you'll see there are two other systems. Data entry is already done because we have the APIs available. Now I'll trigger the UI flow for this scenario. What happens as I click through or initiated the flow? So there is a listener on my PC. Listener will be invoked. And then the flow, which is configured, which is in cloud, will be called. And that is taking all the data set that is from the validated data and launches the application with the credentials, because it is me who initiated, so it takes my credentials and goes into the UI. And the rest is entering a purchase order and its line items. And the flow is also intelligent enough. If the purchase order is already prepackaged, or rather of type like the quote is already agreed between the partner and the company, so it doesn't necessarily need to enter the SKUs. It can go and validate and pull the data from the UI perspective, and then it fills the information automatically. So the technology behind it is you actually record the UI scenario, and then you parameterize the UI output, which is a JSON, and then embed the runtime data into that particular JSON, and then have a player component. Obviously, player component is also part of the UI flows, and then play the UI. So what it is saving, there are two advantages of it, right? The first thing is, I don't have an UI, the API integration available. I don't need to wait till the API is available to do my integration. The second thing is, if it can be a test, early test of your, the validated results. How can I ensure these are all taken care of? So what the bot is doing towards the last step, so it is actually setting up SKUs to be available starting today as the ordering date, and then it moves on. So we're at the last step, and the purchase order comments are entered, and then boom, we go. Now, I'll quickly talk about a couple of reusable components on top of the ecosystem that we have built. And again, these are all equally shared in the AppSource, available for the Dynamics 365 users. The first one is archival and retention. It was very important for us to ensure we are configuring the right archival and retention rules into the system. It's being revenue processing, so we need to have inbuilt controls into the system. So what we have used is we have an app ultimately pushes the Dynamics data, including attachments, into Cosmos DB as our the data storage. The reason it is Cosmos DB is just to ensure we preserve the formatting of that message when it is archived, versus putting in a table with null columns. We don't understand whether it is purposefully null or it was not available at the time of archival. And then the archival rules can be configured within Dynamics 365. That's another thing, and so is retention rules. So in the last but not the least, it supports the GDPR. So these are the premise in which we needed to build it. So we have put that in AppSource, and like Kranti was mentioning, so we do have thousands of users for these apps. And the next one is the data tagging and obfuscation. In order to ensure we have the right data into the lower environment for your scenario testing and whatnot, we use the the data tagging and obfuscation using Azure Data Catalog into the lower environment. Whenever you're doing a prod to dev copy, we run this data obfuscation technology, which actually does two things. One is the format preserving data updates. So that means phone number is always phone number, email address is always email address. It's not like always test@test.com, versus it actually goes through the online dictionary and generates the data and keeps it at the right spot. So, so this is also another capability so that we have built and shipped into the AppSource. And the last thing that I will leave with is the performance and scalability. In order to ensure the system is always available and performant, we don't want to add more hours to the agents as they're processing. So this is something that we have done. Since we have automated most of our unit test cases, the primary, I would say a P1, P2 scenarios, what we did was we have used the UI test cases. We spun up the virtual machines, which equivalents to the number of the users. We spin up those virtual machines and run the tests on top of the service. It is useful in two ways. One, if you have a SaaS service where you don't have too many endpoints on the API layer, it actually provides you the true perceived performance of a particular application. And then the second thing was at every layer, since you are touching the UI, so at UI, what happens to your JavaScripts, what happens to your customization, two, what is the impact on the API services, and also at the DB level, what tuning may be needed. So it actually uncovered all the bottlenecks for us to ensure we get all those, the actionable telemetry to go and rectify the problem. So these are other things that we have done. And it was very helpful for both the changes that we initiated, or the changes that are initiated by the platform and the tools or the products. So with that said, Emily.
Thank you, Shashi. So the impact of, for this particular case, is it okay now? Yeah. So for this particular case of revenue processing using Dynamics 365 and AI, the impact on the business has been very high in that we have a fully 100% control over the process adherence. We're saving about 25 to 30 million over a period of 2 to 3 years, and that's by reducing the time that the agents will take to process a contract or an amendment, since we're automated all these tasks. And also, it's given us the opportunity to unlock new technologies. We've had the opportunity to work with the product teams, whether Dynamics 365, to do some co-development on the features that you've seen, but also with the Visio team for OCR, and with the Power Automate for RPA. So a lot of learnings for both us and for the product team, given that at Microsoft, we're one of the largest customers of Dynamics 365. So with that said, that's all we have today. Opening up for questions on what you've seen or any other business apps that we developed.
So on the preamble for this session, it says that we can get your app on the AppSource, but I can't find it.
Which one, sorry?
We can.
Which one? Which question?
Your app is available on AppSource.
Yes.
So it's called Dynamics 365 for BPO.
Yeah.
It's primarily a back-end process. Business process outsourcing is what typically happens, in a scenario like invoicing and revenue processing.
Yeah.
So if you search for Dynamics 365 for BPO, you'll have an app there.
Yeah.
And the typical features are like, escalation management, hold management, and some of these like, the plugins like, pushing the paper into, blob storage, etc. So they're all, and also we have done one more thing is called actionable audit. How do you ensure you actually you get the rich auditing that today is not exportable and made it available for reporting or any trending? So we actually enable that particular feature as part of that app.
Yeah, we refer to BPO as the location as well, where contracts are being handled and managed. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So you started off by saying this is a journey,
Yeah.
which to me is code for it took a long time.
Yes.
How long did this take, and how much interaction did you have with your product group that
Yeah.
we don't have access to?
Yes, so it was a journey. We started about 2 years ago. It was a journey because this was not a migration from the old system to the new one. This was really recreating a completely different experience. At the same time, we were, as I said, working with the product team, given that this is, I think after HP, it's probably one of the largest implementations, at least in size and number of transactions, not so much in number of users, but number of transactions. So yeah, about 2 years, but and also, appreciating that it's 100 billion revenue that goes through this system, that not one agreement is the same as another one. I think we have about probably more than 500 forms, right? And all in different languages. And so for each one, particularly when you're doing OCR, you've got to very thoroughly map your form to then the process automation. And we're still there in the journey, in that we still have many more forms that we have to go and put through this process, but we've done at least to the
currently.
The most common, yeah. We had, to your question about how access to the product team we've really worked very jointly with the team. Every time we wanted a new feature, we would collaborate and ensure that it's either in the roadmap. If it's not in the roadmap, how could we do it together if we thought this was something that many customers were going to be using? And also the publishing some of this on AppSource as well has helped, as well as a feedback mechanism to make the required changes to our app.
And also just, again, like, yeah, also make some of those apps into native CDS.
Yeah.
It's just another way to look at it, right? Again, like put it there. Not only I need it, but also my end customers also need it, and then put it natively back. In fact, to just give one more pointer on our implementation, our first line of business went live in 4 months, okay? We're not that complex, but at the same time, like we have our own constraints in terms of we cannot lose anything. First set of line of businesses, in fact, not just one, 4 together went, in 4 months, and then we added all these components, on top of it. So we were live within 4 months to start with, and then build upon. Like it's still a journey. We'll see more opportunities. It's not just data capture, business rule engine, and like a Power Automate scenario. We will add some more. How do you tackle the SOX workflow? How do you ensure the compliance and controls are fully baked or even automatable? Or automatable controls, right? What can I automate, what I not? So we still need to go in through the submission phases of the process.
And one thing we have also is that we have a huge amount of freeze periods and periods during which we can make such changes without impacting other lines of businesses as well, of course. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you for your time, and if you think of other questions, you know where to find us.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.